Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Twin Bill Baseball Podcast. I am What a Day Joe, along with the player Benny Scholar, and we have a special guest today, Dan, the smartest man in the room. You got to love it. Dan, welcome to the Twin Bill Baseball Podcast. And today we're talking baseball contracts, salaries, all that good stuff through the years. Almost kind of like what went wrong type of scenario at this point, right? I mean, these baseball contracts are just through the roof. I'm looking at the notes these are real notes that the player has emailed me, and it was like studying for an SAT exam, reading this stuff. But Benny, I'm going to let you lead it off here. Talk to us. What's going on with these baseball salaries in the Major League Baseball?
Let me talk to you. Well, that's a different podcast. Wait a minute. I was going to say that Dan and I have never done a podcast without talking about baseball. So now that we're doing a baseball podcast, of course, the first thing I do is make a wrestling reference. Go figure, right? So I call this episode Moneyball because we're going to talk about over the last 100 years or so baseball salaries, and it goes from from a pittance to a king's ransom. But the first I didn't realize there were so many excellent resources, but some of this information I got from the Society for American Baseball Research.
Yeah.
And then the other source is the Baseball Almanac, and then baseballreference.com, which, I mean, If you're a stat junkie, I mean, that's like crack. I mean, any one of those, I can get lost in those things for hours and hours. I even wanted to find out the date of the first baseball game I ever went to. And I knew that it was in August of 1964. I knew it was against the San Francisco Giants, and I knew the game lasted 14 innings. And so I was able to find the game and actually the box score.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, crazy. Some stuff that you never thought, like as a kid, you'd be able to do. And
you can find everything now on the internet.
It really is mind-blowing. But, I went back to 1916. So the very first player that I tracked was Ty Cobb.
Okay.
Tyrus Raymond Cobb, I think, the Georgia Peach.
Okay.
The greatest, average-wise hitter that ever lived, right? I think his lifetime average was 367. Had the hit record that Pete Rose broke.
Okay.
But he led the league in salary in the major leagues from 1916 through 1921.
Wow.
So for that, he made $20,000 a year, and for the last year he made $25,000. And just to, and what the other source that I used was an inflation calculator.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you must have needed that for these bad boys.
So yeah, $25,000 in 1921 would be worth about $382,000 today. And now my favorite New York Yankee, the rookie, the Gold Glove shortstop Anthony Volpe, is currently at the major league minimum. The major league minimum is $720,000. So, I mean, Cobb made, adjusted for inflation, around half of the major league minimum.
I would have shagged flies when I was a kid in the outfield for a rookie salary. Geez, this is crazy.
Exactly. So, I mean, just here's one of the years, 1917.
Yeah.
He leads the league in hits with 225, 44 doubles, 24 triples, 55 stolen bases, 383 batting average, a 444 OBP on base percentage. Now, what would anybody that had to put together a season like that, what would they get now?
Oh, well, obviously, Dan, your input on this would be greatly appreciated. A lot of these look like performance-based contracts back then. Do you agree?
A lot of them were. I mean, it's funny because Benny and I, obviously, both being money guys behind the scene, and it's funny. It's funny you showed those notes. I spent all those years as a history major, up to a master's degree, and I don't think I saw as many numbers on one piece of paper as Benny's notes for today. But no, it's funny because it wasn't even just performance; it was also secondary. You always hear stories about Bart Starr being the only person to play in the first Super Bowl that didn't have a second job. There were a lot of baseball players that would go work the factory in the summer, and then in the spring training rolled around. Hey, they're let's play baseball on the side. And it's crazy to think, like Benny was saying, the league minimum today is about 3 times what players, if not more, back then were making when they were the highest paid players in the league. It's runaway inflation and runaway performance. I mean, baseball's also making the money.
No, I totally agree with that. And when I look at these numbers back then, and some of the, you throw in the inflation calculator in there that we all love. Like back then, there wasn't much to do or go around with or buy. What did they do with this kind of money back then? I mean, obviously, drink it away. Did they just buy if there were cars even around? Like, what did they do with that kind of?
Well, that's really funny because a guy like Ty Cobb supposedly became a very, very wealthy man because he didn't spend the money, he invested it. But then you got a guy like Babe Ruth, who's actually the person I wanted to chat about next. I mean, now you got to remember Babe Ruth's background. He was in I guess, a reform school from the time he was 7, I guess, till he was 18 in Baltimore.
Kid,
yeah. I mean, he had parents, but I think his dad owned a saloon. And Babe, probably was drinking at the bar at, 9 years old and doing his math homework. But I mean, they I guess the fact that he was they couldn't control him. So they sent him, was it St. Mary's, I think, was the name of the orphanage, and played there at their baseball team. But he was the first player to crack 50,000. He received, he got 52 grand a year from 22 to 26. Then they bumped him up to 70 from 27 to 29. And in 1930, he was bumped to 80 grand. Now, 80 grand in 1930 would be worth around $1,380,080. That is about 1/30th, about 3% of what the current Yankee captain, Aaron Judge, makes today.
Oh, God.
And now, let's take a look at that 1930 season. Ruth hit 49 home runs, drove in 153, hit 359. Had an on-base percentage, ungodly, 0.49.
Why can't the Red Sox get a player like that?
Nah. Yeah, imagine that. And a slugging percentage of 732, just like unbelievable numbers. And they asked him that there's a famous quote about somebody asking Babe Ruth. They said, you made more money than Herbert Hoover, who was the president. Oh, wow. And Babe said, why not? I had a better year than he did.
Oh, nice, nice.
Nice by the Bambino. But it was true. I mean, guy was larger than life.
So, but these salaries, though. Now, another thing I noticed when looking over this this tax bracket that you emailed me, a lot. It was mainly the big market teams that had this type of money. I'm not seeing any obscure locations. Like most of it is the Yankees, Red Sox, might be a couple of Giants on here and so forth. But I'm not seeing like the lower ball clubs spend that kind of money.
That's a very good point, because if you look at the SABR, the Society for American Baseball Research, it just lists that year after year who's the highest paid player in the league, and more often than not, it was a Brooklyn Dodger, a New York Giant, a New York Yankee, or a Boston Red Sox. Yeah, it very rarely was in anything in the smaller market. But exactly now after Babe though, salaries kind of. I mean, who's going to follow the Babe? Garrick actually was his crony, the number 4 hitter. Sure. Something I didn't know till later on in life, that when they started numbers, they started numbering uniforms, so it's based on your position in the batting order. And that the reason why Babe was 3 and Garrick was 4 is they were 3, 4 in the batting order.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard that before. So Dan, your thoughts? I mean, this is big money back then. What do you think they spent the money on?
Well, it's funny. You're right that they didn't have, obviously disposable income was a thing back in the 20s. They didn't call it the Roaring 20s for nothing. I mean, so it wouldn't take much for someone making $50,000 a year to have multiple cars and a fancy house, but a box full of cigars. But they didn't have the idea of traveling the world on luxury vacations and a satellite dish in the house. And, you may have had a prize racehorse, but you also, like Benny said, a lot of those guys had to be smart with it, or they ended up drinking it away or losing it to the, I hate to sound cruel, but losing it to the women in their lives.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Look at Mickey Mantle. I mean, we were talking about that last week. The movie 61, that chronicles some of the off-field behavior of Mickey Mantle. And I mean, the fix was in, right? Paying off all those people.
I wonder if so I got to tell this story. Maybe, if this is too crude, you can always bleep it out. But I read, I think it was called The Last American Boy, Mantle's biography, and they sent him a postcard after he retired, and they said, "What was your most memorable moment at Yankee Stadium?" And he said he got a blowjob under the right field bleachers. Not his 500th home run, or not winning the seventh game of the World. That was his most memorable moment again.
Did he say when he was sober, or
who knows? I mean, but
I know ball players are all that, but ball players usually remember their greatest comebacks or home runs or game-winning drives and all that stuff.
Right.
So, you would think that'd be more relevant than a blowjob under the right field bleachers.
Oh, man.
Yeah. We each have our priorities there. But now after the Babe, Lou Gehrig was the highest paid, but he never cracked 40 grand. So you went from Babe making 80,000 to Gehrig, and who arguably was at least as good of a ball player. The bad part was he played Babe's shadow. He would have been a megastar in any team he played with. I mean, any other team that he played with, they would have built the whole team around him. But he was Babe Ruth's second fiddle to Babe. And I don't think the kind of guy that he was, Gehrig, I don't think he really minded that much, because it's, by all accounts, a very quiet, humble guy.
Right. Now, but Dan, you're a history major, right, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so think about it back then. What are we talking, 40s, 50s? These guys have agents? Did they represent themselves? Did they just say, hey, play for us, sign on the dotted line, and that's it?
In some cases, it wasn't uncommon for players to represent themselves because contracts were significantly less legalese back then.
Right.
But you also had, what's the word? There wasn't as much of what we would consider free agency. Sure. So it wouldn't take much for there to be a law firm in New York, and they had the reputation as those are the guys you go to if you're going to play for the Yankees.
Right.
And you might work a contract, and then, hey, if you play well, we'll give you 10% next year. If you play poorly, whatever. And so right. You really wasn't a need for these 70. I mean, you hear stories like we talk money modern times. Ohtani this year made $70 million. And 40 of that was in endorsements. I mean, you're talking thousands of pages of contract to make $40 million in endorsements. Babe Ruth's initial contract in the Hall of Fame is barely 2 pages. And most of it is like, don't drink and don't eat and drink yourself to a big fat death while you're in the locker room.
Hot dogs before the game.
Right.
But, I read Yogi's book, and Yogi would get his contract in the mail during the off season.
Yep.
Wow.
While he was working at Sears, which we talked about before. Him and Joe Garagiola worked at Sears. They had to.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, it was a windfall. And
do you think they ever asked him for like money up front? I mean, before the sign-on bonuses kicked in and all that stuff. You think they said, okay, you're going to pay me 50 grand. I need 20 now. I need to pay this off now. You think they ever had that type of sly stuff going on?
I don't think they thought that way. I think they were so glad to be given a chance that
I
forgot Yogi's signing bonus was like, it was in the hundreds of dollars. I don't think it was even in the thousands. But him and now he a couple of years in his early tenure with the Yankees, his World Series share, the winning, which we're going to get into later, was actually higher than his salary for the whole year. Like these guys that were at the Yankees, I mean, they got paid double because most years they were in the World Series, and most years they were winning it. So they were, whatever they made, they almost kind of banked on that extra check.
Wow.
It's funny. I just want to put it out there because we were talking about Benny. You mentioned how Gehrig was kind of in Babe's shadow. One of my favorite stats in the history of baseball, 1927, Gehrig hit, 175 RBIs. And that was the year Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs. So he hit 175 RBIs, and 60 of his at-bats were with empty bases.
Wow.
So like, I mean, that's, I think it's unfortunate that he doesn't get the credit he deserves, but he certainly, when you hear like Babe Ruth was making 3 times the money he was at his peak, like that almost seems unfair.
Gehrig just went out every day and he did his job.
Yeah.
That's gonna, I believe, would be a future episode, be the greatest team of all time. And I think you gotta immediately bring up the 1927 Yankees.
Yeah,
they played the game because they enjoyed it. Getting paid was a bonus,
right?
Obviously not nowadays because these kids are groomed right from grade school. It seems like, but and that entitlement factor and everything. But that entitlement factor didn't seem like it was relevant back then. It looks like they showed up. They wanted to play. Some of the best owners got some of the best teams together, such as the Yankees and so forth, and they did what they could with it. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
Just look at these numbers are insane. I mean, Ted Williams, 1951. Now, is that post? When he was he in the Korean War or World War II?
He was in both.
He was in both, right?
Yeah, he missed, I think, the equivalent of almost 6 full seasons. And
Yeah, 6
I
full
think
seasons.
he hit
He threw in the name,
521
yeah.
home runs. I mean,
And
he lost 6 of his prime years.
right.
He
So
might have been the all-time leader.
yeah, he could have been if we took 6 years off, and probably his prime years too, right? If I'm not mistaken.
In my mind, the best hitter of all time is that man.
Yep.
Ted Williams.
Unbelievable.
I don't think anybody, in terms of like, I mean, there's higher average hitters and there's better power hitters, but combined, and his eye at the plate, his on base percentage, just, it was ungodly. But
So-
speaking of Red Sox,
Yep.
World War II, great Red Sox player Joe Cronin.
Yeah, Joey Cronin. Yep.
The Hall of Fame shortstop. Now, he was in 1943, 1944, was only making $27,000.
Wow.
So you went from like 80 grand with the Babe. Now you're down to like almost about a third of it. And Cronin was actually a part-time player and the manager of the Red Sox at that time.
Wow.
They're doing double duty.
Yeah, a lot of them were. I mean, there are some other ball players out there that did serve that don't get the notoriety because they probably weren't as famous as Ted Williams and Joe Cronin and all that. My other question for this would be, looking at these numbers and obviously how high they are, where's the money coming from? We're not talking TV media rights here. We're talking pure ticket sales. I mean,
fannies in the seats,
I don't know.
right?
Where does the money come from?
That's it. I mean, it's just pretty much, there were no such thing. I don't think there was a thing as a corporate box back then. I doubt it.
No, you have to realize. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Benny. Go
right ahead.
I was going to say, you have to realize it's not just the ticket sales. I mean, you had, you're talking the cheap seats at Yankee Stadium were 50 cents. Like, what you had was a lot of baseball owners. Baseball was a second, third, fourth business for them. I mean, you mentioned Babe Ruth earlier. Boston traded him away because their ownership ran into money trouble because of failed investments in Hollywood. Like, you have
Nanette.
Harry Frazee, right, Joe? Nanette.
Exactly. So, when you're talking, I got to pay Babe Ruth 50 grand, or I got to pay 20,000 to a player. That's not, that one guy is selling $20,000 worth of jerseys. It's, he's bringing in enough ticket sales and I'm making enough money elsewhere that to me, that's worth it.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays with the revenue sharing and some of the stuff that sports have, even a small market team, is pocketing millions.
Right.
Just on other contracts.
Yeah, we're talking like pre-television, and even radio was in its infancy.
Yeah,
it was pretty much fannies in the seats.
Yeah,
and that's what paid for their salaries.
That's the first thing that struck me as odd. Is like, where did the money come from? Like you said, Dan, 50 cents to get into a bleacher seat or something like that. I mean, not even pennies probably back in the day, but they definitely weren't making their money off the attendance of the fans and so forth. And I'm not even sure what was marketable back then. Did they sell jerseys back then? I mean, what did they actually sell at the ballpark besides hot dogs and beer and popcorn?
I'm going to guess they sold, besides the food, they sold programs. And I bet just the program scorecard was it. I can't imagine there's any, if they had tchotchkes back then, I doubt it. But
I mean, and you also have to realize there was a lot of tie-in merchandise that you wouldn't think of. Like, everybody knows the Abner Doubleday baseball card.
Yeah.
Back then baseball cards were cut out of the inside of a pack of cigarettes. So, and everybody smoked in the 1920s. So baseball was getting a cut of cigarette sales, or you'd have, I hate to say it, but prohibition, you definitely had some cops that would look the other way towards the drinks you were selling at the ballpark.
Oh, sure.
So there was a little bit of money to be made there, but it wasn't, like I said, there wasn't a massive merchandise market. I mean, that's why you can't go on eBay or any of these sites and let me go buy an old Babe Ruth action figure or Babe Ruth jersey or whatever. I mean, you just didn't have it.
Nope, that stuff wasn't out there then. Unbelievable. Yeah. So, what was it? What we talked about last week, Benny, was A League of Their Own. Obviously, one of the top 10 movies. Do we know what their salaries were back then? The women made those 4 years when the war was going, or the 6 years that they were around?
I'm thinking they played for like roast beef sandwiches. I mean, they weren't making. I would imagine it was like in the hundreds of dollars a month. I mean, it was probably just like That's a good question. Now you have.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it last week. It just popped into my head, like, you're going through the years. I'm like, well, what happened to the war years when, the guys went off to fight the war and the ladies took over for a few years? What were their salaries?
If this was Dan and Benny in the ring, I would say that they supplemented their income by turning tricks, but I'm not going to do that. But I mean, who knows? They weren't making a lot. If they made $1,000 a month, I would be absolutely shocked.
Right.
I'm not sure.
If anybody cares, according to our friends at Wikipedia, the average salary for an All-American girls professional baseball league player was between $45 and $85 a week.
Wow.
So yeah, like $300 and change a month,
which is the equivalent of about $700 to $1,400 in today's money.
That's about a hot dog and a handshake.
Yep.
I'd shake flies for that.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable. All right. So we got all the numbers in here. When did the change come? When did free agency? When did all this, I'm not going to say small money because obviously back then, but we got Willie Mays was the first 6-figure ball player. That's going to be astronomical back in 63.
The first $100,000 ball player was Joe DiMaggio in 1949.
Okay.
So, and he was he was already at the tail end of his career.
Okay, the Yankee. Yep. Okay.
And now Williams, let's see, in 1951, Williams grabbed the top spot at $90,000.
Oh wow.
And then in 52 through 54, $85,000. So they're cutting the guy's pay, and it actually reduced to $67,500 in 1955. So just in 1954, he led the American League in walks, on base percentage, slugging, OPS. His on base percentage was .513, which is, he's getting on base twice a game. And
Dan, do you think anything was incentivized back then? Looking at some of these stats, Willie Mays was MVP and all that. Did they get extra for that, or was that part of the contract where you're going to make this X amount, but you got to meet these goals?
Honestly, there are a few notations in history of famous incentives. Benny mentioned earlier, if players making their World Series bonus was more than their base salary, but right. No, for the most part, and I know it sounds archaic now, but like we talked about how when you're making, side job money, you're playing for the love of the game up until really the 1960s when you started seeing legit big money. It was bragging rights. He got to retire saying, I'm the best player that's ever done this, or there was a lot of taunting at the bar after the game involved.
Right.
You really didn't start seeing the huge contracts until technically 1975, but
right.
With free agency.
But Joe was right about Willie Mays. Willie was pretty much, he hit it in 105,063. And again, even index for inflation, that's about $1 million.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Mays had won the MVP award the previous season, was the Gold Glove for center field,
right?
And was a member of the National League pennant-winning Giants, who came literally within an eyelash of winning that 1962 World Series against the Yankees. Willie McCovey hit a ball about 900 miles an hour that if Bobby Richardson wasn't standing there, they would have had that World Series. But Mays was the perennial from 59 through 70. Was the highest earner, and rightly so. I think he was
right.
I don't think too many. Him, Aaron, and Mantle probably the three best ball players. But he peaked at 125.
Yeah,
and the only year that he did not get it was 66, which was Koufax.
Sure,
and that was his last year in baseball. He was 27-9 with a 1.73 ERA, 27 complete games, 5 shutouts, and 317 strikeouts. So the 27 complete games for the season is one less than Adam Wainwright, who pitches, I believe, for the Cardinals, that he's accumulated in an 18-year career.
Yeah.
Wow.
And even his salary is equivalent to about $1.2 million. If a guy put up those kind of numbers now, what kind of money are they going to get?
I think it goes to what you were talking about earlier, Joe, too, with the merchandise. He's a great example because you expect Koufax is another one where you can go and find baseball cards, bobblehead. Well, I guess the early dolls, shirts that they, by that time, when you're making what Benny said was $1 million equivalent today, they started having heavy merchandise.
Right.
You could go find a Sandy Koufax doll in a museum somewhere or on eBay from a collector. So the team started really making money off some of their stars.
Now, I remember, obviously, I don't know how old everybody is here, but the first big contract name I remember growing up, obviously, you had it listed here, Dave Winfield, 1981. I was about 12 years old then. And that was that staggering contract, 10 years, $23 million. That was huge back then.
Absolutely.
That was absolutely huge. And did Winfield even play for the Yankees for 10 years after that?
No. I think he played for maybe half of that.
So my question would be, how much was that? Was there even a guaranteed factor back then?
I believe there was, but I think maybe that, like, if the Yankees traded him, I think they were on the hook for part of his salary. I believe that I can't verify.
Yeah.
Actually, Catfish Hunter was the first. In 1974, he signed a 5-year, $3.25 million contract, which is about $650 a year, which, like, at that time was ungodly money. And then Mike Schmidt was the first $500,000 player in 77. Nolan Ryan was the first $1 million player in 1980. And then Schmidt was the first $2 million player in 85. And then in 1992, the New York Mets paid Bobby Bonilla $6,100,000, making him the first $5 million player. And he's still getting paid.
Bobby Bonilla Day. Was that July 1st? Is that July 1st?
I think he's still getting about $1.3 million.
That's winding down soon, isn't it? That was like only 20 years, right?
Yeah. I mean,
it's getting there, but they
still call it Bobby. It's 20. Was it 2026 or something?
It's coming to an end.
Like he's got a couple years left.
The guy hasn't swung a bat since 2001, and for the last 22 years, he's getting a check in the mail for about $1.3 million.
Who was his agent?
Right?
Yeah, I know, right? I want to sign me up.
You talk about contracts. I remember because I'm significantly younger than you guys,
Whoa. How much younger can you be from me?
I'm 40. So
I'm the old man here.
Yeah, Benny's the fossil. But I remember as a teenager in 92, Cal Ripken signed a very incentive-laden contract. It was 5-year, $30 million, up to 9-year, $32.5 million. And at the time, that was the largest contract in the history of baseball. And then that was when they brought in, like, a couple years later, and you bring in, like, you gave Messina the extension. They bring in Roberto Alomar, and here 32 million, 9-year, $32.5 million is the biggest contract in history. You just had a record, a year or two ago, a 10-year, $300 million contract. So in less than 20 years, 10 times the amount of money.
And obviously TV changed.
Yeah, of course.
More teams, expansion came in, or all that good stuff. I mean, staggering numbers, to say the least. It's funny. I hate switching gears like this, but I remember Derek Sanderson. I'm a hockey guy.
Boston
Bruins. He was one of the first $1 million guys when he played for, I think it was Philadelphia. He went to the World Hockey League after he got let go of the Bruins.
The Bruins, yeah.
And his stories were just crazy. Like, he was making millions of dollars, but obviously big drinker and all that stuff. He would walk into a bar and just tell everybody, we're all going to Vegas. And everyone's like, well, what should I bring? He goes, just a shirt off your back. I got a plane ready. And that was it. And then they were gone for like a week or whatever. That's how he threw his money away. But I look back on that and be like, playing hockey, that hockey they didn't make that kind of money back then. But evidently Philly and World Hockey League wanted Derek Sanderson so bad based on the cup years for Boston that I think it was $2 million 1972 we made.
That's good money back then.
That's how long was that for a hockey player?
How long was the World Hockey League?
Wasn't long. Wasn't that long.
3 years maybe, or like that. A lot of guys jumped though, right? Gordie Howe jumped, Bobby Hull jumped.
They all did. And then
Sanderson jumped.
So that was that always rings true to me about money and what people did with it and all that stuff. But yeah, Dave Winfield was the first guy I remember, and then obviously the boom in the 80s, like you said, Schmidt, all those guys. Obviously, the free agency was huge. The salary cap I can't remember in the 80s. Was there a salary cap, or was that being debated on with the players' reps and all that stuff?
I don't think there was.
Because there was a big strike in 82, somewhere around the 81,
Yeah,
82,
I think the salary cap is within the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so that was a big deal. I mean, when the players went on strike in 81, 82, and that was a big strike laden season.
Yeah,
took a lot of people out, and then they had another one in the 90s.
well, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the baseball had fallen apart. It was the home run chase between McGuire and Sosa that actually
that was
pretty much saved baseball, because there were networks talking about cutting the TV rights, like no one is watching or caring anymore.
Yeah.
But if I may, you were talking about salary cap, Benny. You said that the salary cap they have today, part of the reason baseball contracts are so crazy today is because baseball doesn't technically have a hard salary cap. They have a ceiling, and then they have the luxury tax.
Well, right, exactly.
If you want to pay $100 million over the salary cap, great. All you got to do is pay a fine. That's why you can get these. What was Scherzer? $59 million he made this year.
Crazy.
Verlander and Scherzer were the two top.
Yeah, you can get that because teams can spend, as long as they have the money, they can spend whatever they want. So there is, technically there is a salary cap, but it's really on paper only.
And a lot of that money does come from the TV rights now.
Yes,
the expansion with cable, and now I don't know how it is with streaming now. Everybody's streaming. I streamed the Red Sox from the Nesson platform back in New England down to Iowa, where I'm at now, and it's insane.
Baseball's unique in that sense. Unlike maybe hockey, I would give hockey credit too, as a big hockey fan. But the NFL, the NBA, they all have these national contracts. Baseball doesn't really have widespread national contracts. You have a lot of regional sports. Like as an Orioles fan, I have to watch MASN, the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network. To get the Orioles games, to get if I want to watch the Capitals, or if I as you get further north, you've got so. Somebody like Baltimore, because I'm where as a fan, I'll use Baltimore as an example. They'll never get the contract that the Yankees have from the New York NBC affiliate, because you're talking, there's 11 million more people watching that. Baltimore is always going to be hard pressed for, obviously you just heard what we're recording this on the 16th. Earlier today, the owners signed off on the A's moving to Vegas.
Yeah, so, I saw that. I saw that.
Oakland, the money they were sucking from that contract.
Still no stadium yet though in Vegas. So what is it, the lease is up in 2026 or something like that?
Yeah.
But so now Vegas has to press for. They have the money, I'm sure, but now that's going to have to go forward. But that's huge. The Oakland A's now, a storied franchise in Oakland, is now going to Vegas.
Yep.
I did read that.
The fourth city for the Athletics.
Yeah, the A's and the Raiders now.
Philadelphia, then to Kansas City, and then to Oakland, Vegas.
You're right. I forgot about Kansas City. I was thinking Philly and Oakland.
I think 55 through 66, they were the Kansas City Athletics.
Yeah.
And I know we're talking about football real quickly, but what is it? The Chicago Bears are moving. They're moving 20 miles south. I forget what town they're going to, but they're out of the city now. They're leaving Chicago. They're leaving the south side.
Oh, wow. But they'll still be the Chicago Bears, though, right?
They'll still be the Chicago Springfield. I forget where it's at. It's like 20 miles south, but they proved that.
Okay.
They wanted to get out of Chicago. I'm like, wow. I mean, I've been in Chicago. It's right in the heart of town, but I just can't believe they did that. So
the Redskins did the same thing when they left RFK about 20 years ago, because FedEx Field is in Landover. That's out. That's not in DC. That's heart of Maryland.
Well, that's like the Patriots playing Foxborough, and that's 30 miles south of Boston. So
how about the Jets and the Giants don't even play in New York?
Yeah, I know. I can't believe that. We just switching gears again. Watch that weekend that Aaron Rodgers got hurt and all that stuff, beginning of the year.
Yeah.
There was 2 games in 12 hours at MetLife Stadium. I think the Giants played Sunday night, and then the Jets played Monday night. I said, they better not do that again. There's a jinx going on or something, because 2 games in 12 hours at the same stadium, 2 different home teams. That's I don't know. To me, that's weird. It's taboo. Can't do that.
No, I agree with that.
It's like having Raw and SmackDown in the same arena. You can't do that anymore.
Nope.
I don't like that.
last time you had two wrestling venues close together DX drove a tank down to the heart of Norfolk. So,
was it Norfolk or Atlanta? No, it was Norfolk. You're right.
Yeah, it was, they were in Norfolk and Hampton, so they drove across the bridge.
Wow.
You think that was a work back then? I mean, come on.
I mean, they have to be in on it.
Bishop didn't know he was knocking at the door.
It doesn't get nearly the attention, but back when TNA was still when they were really gaining steam with Kurt Angle and some of those guys, they had a bit. I'm sorry to go on a side wrestling story, but they had a bit where they went to a WWE event just to like, hey, Vin, we're here to show the big boys, blah, blah, blah. And there were people in the back because catering was like semi outside, and there's a blurry face, but you can tell there's it's a short guy with a mask. Like, okay, you're clearly talking to Rey Mysterio right now. They blurred Eddie Guerrero's face, but he had his a Poppy shirt on. You could still read the wrestlers came out because they knew these guys a lot and it wasn't until security finally was like, oh, we gotta cut this. So yeah, I guarantee when the cameras weren't rolling, half the WWE locker room was out there bullshitting and having a good old time.
Yeah, they're all fun.
Yeah. I mean, I have my thoughts on all that stuff. I still think Tony Khan and WWE are in cahoots, but that's just me.
Hey, you never know. Maybe
they saved wrestling right before COVID, so I think something was up there. So who knows? But nonetheless, these contracts are amazing to say the least, no doubt about it. I'm sorry, I missed it. The player, who's the highest paid ball player right now? Is it Scherzer?
Well, now it was for this year. It was Scherzer and Verlander. I'm not sure for 2024 who it's going to be, but I wanted, if we could, maybe just to talk about some of these like long-term contracts over the last Winfield got his in 81.
Yeah, that was 10
and
years,
maybe
right?
like if we think they actually earn their money, like to me, Winfield for 10 years at $23 million was an absolute steal.
Sure.
And then Jeter in 2001 was a 10-year, $189 million. So $18.9 million. I think he definitely earned that contract. I mean, I'm not going to say that about too many of these. I think, and here's one I think we can all agree on, that Albert Pujols.
Yeah, Pujols was big back then. Yeah,
10 in 2012, 10 years, $240 million, and his prior. If you look at his first, I guess 11 seasons with the Cardinals,
right?
I mean, the guy. I mean, he was crushing him. The guy was averaging probably 40 homers, 125 RBIs. I think his career average was like about 315, and then over the next 10 years. Because I'm a stat guy, obviously, and I just watched his batting average slowly. I thought, like, you know what? If this guy keeps it up, he's going to end his career under 300. And sure enough, he did. I mean, what a career the guy had. I mean, 704 home runs I think he's got. I mean, just unbelievable. But
you still look at these contracts, but how much of it is guaranteed, though? Like when you sign, what check does he get the next day?
I think, and Dan can correct me, I think unlike football, I think a baseball contract is pretty much guaranteed money. If they cut you, I believe they have to
still get paid.
Pay you rather. And
I mean, some contracts will have exit clauses. You saw that with when the Mets signed Scherzer and DeGrom at the same time,
right?
Because that's what 80, almost 90 million between the two of them. And then to answer your question, Benny, next year, Scherzer's making 43 million next year, which I think is the highest too. So, but most Major League Baseball contracts are pretty much guaranteed. That's why you'll see a lot of the contracts will get backloaded. We'll give you 10-year, 100 million, but 40 million of that is year 10 because we know you won't be here. Right. So by then you'll be retired or we'll trade you or whatever, and we won't have to pay some of that money.
I know there are still checks Manny Ramirez is getting from the Red Sox. Not a lot, but we're still paying him a decent amount.
If you open your mailbox and there's money in it, it's a good day. But I mean, what were the Angels thinking though? I mean, the guy, now Pujols, and it's one of these guys that nobody really knows how old he is, but he, on MLB.com, he's listed as 1980. So when he signed this deal in 2012, he's 32.
Yeah.
You're signing a 10-year deal. What's your productivity going to be by, like, say, year 5, year 6?
That's got to play a role somewhere, though.
You're going to be on the downside. I mean, like, who's going to think that at 41, Albert Pujols is still going to be mashing, 43 homers, driving in 130 runs? Nobody's going to do that.
But is any of this incentivized too as well? I
don't think so. I think this was just, he made that dough. And I mean, here's a bust. At least I think Giancarlo Stanton 2015, 13 years, $325 million. I think the guy hit 190 last year. And he's missed, I think, since he's been with the Yankees. I'm not sure if since he's been with the Yankees or his whole career, he's missed 36% of the games that he's supposed to play.
Was that a Cashman signing?
Yes.
It was. Okay.
It was. But, I mean, what job can you show up for work 64% of the time?
Oh.
And then when you show up to 64% of the time, you do shitty work. I mean, how long are you going to have a job? But this guy, he's
I know who gets that. Meteorologists, they get that.
Right.
What do they write? 37% of the time on a 365-day average?
You go to college for 4 years to get a degree in meteorology so you can guess the weather like everybody else.
You know what? I'm going to have to disagree with you, though, Benny. My personal opinion, and this is just the money side, the really modern times, the worst contract, you got to go with Strasburg and the Nationals. I mean, yes, he retired, which saved them money after his carpal tunnel, but $35 million a season, and he was 1-4 before he went down for his surgery and never played again. Based on the guarantees, that one win cost the Nationals $105 million.
Jeez.
So you'd be hard pressed. I even as an Orioles fan thinking how bad the Chris Davis contract was, which is I think one of the worst of the last decade.
He had one good year, right, Davis? Right, he was smashing homers. He put on a show at Fenway Park one time.
He had 1 year that if that was every season, you're a Hall of Famer, and he had a couple of damn this, the crush nickname, hey, this guy might hit.
Right.
But I mean, at one, you give him this massive contract extension, and within a year and a half, he's setting records for strikeouts and leading the league in what was it? It was swings per hit or something like it was just how bad he was.
Still getting paid though. Still,
you know what? He got Davis got a Bobby Bonilla style contract where a lot of his money is deferred, and the Orioles aren't even going to start paying him some of it. I think it's 2030, and then he's going to get a check every year for a few seasons.
Now, typically, the pitchers aren't getting the longer. I don't know what Strasburg's deal was in terms of number of years, but I mean, how about Jacob deGrom signed I always say he's the poster boy for Vagisil. He's just he's a sissy. Right. But I think it's 5 years, $185 million the Rangers signed him for, and he pitched maybe 10 games.
Now you say he's the poster boy for Vagisil. Is that because he puts the oil on his glove or his cap, or is that
because he's a baby? He's a baby. But you know what he is. But I mean, and they showed a picture of him posing with the World Series trophy. He's like, you didn't win that. Give that to somebody who actually busted their butt every day.
That's the equivalent. You hear stories about some random player that you've never heard of that has 3 Super Bowl rings because he was a 5th string at the right place and right time.
Oh, the Patriots got plenty of those guys, practice squad guys, all this stuff, and you don't find out they have the 3 rings or 4 rings until they go into the studio and they're on some random talk show.
Right,
4-time Super Bowl player, and I'm like going, who is that? Oh yeah, let me look him up. Oh, practice squad. Okay, made 2 appearranes in the playoffs, and that was it.
Right.
So, I definitely hear you there.
But I can't see. I mean, with as fragile as frail these pitchers are, I mean, giving any pitcher a long-term contract, I think, is a crapshoot.
That goes to what I was saying. Strasburg's contract was 7-year, $245 million, and he was already this good season he had was a miracle because you already knew he was injury prone.
Right. And same with deGrom. I mean, deGrom had a couple of seasons where he didn't even pitch 10 games or throw 50 innings. What are they thinking to give this guy this kind of money?
Here's a good question, mixing it up a little bit. Position-wise, who's the most pitchers, catchers? I mean, Ortiz was a great ball player, Big Papi, but he was a DH, made good money. So if you had to look at some of these stats now, is it the pitcher that makes the most money, or is it the hitter now? Does it go by position? If you had to really put it all together.
I think the pitchers can make the most money per season, but they're less likely to. Here's an example: Fernando Tatis signed in 2021 a 14-year contract for $340 million. So it's not that much on a per year basis. Not that it's chump change, but I mean for 14 years. Mookie Betts 12 at 365, so that's about 30 mil. Trout was 10 at 36. I think Aaron Judge is 9 years at 360. So he's 40 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I still have no idea why the Red Sox let Mookie Betts go.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that all happened during COVID, and they were going to try and nullify the contract, and they let the best player in baseball go. And I still scratch my head off that. I just don't get it. I don't know how it happened, but it's insanity.
Not to kick the Red Sox while they're down, but I mentioned Strasburg, I think, is the worst contract in recent memory.
Sure.
A very close second has got to be Boston's contract with Chris Sale. I mean, he pitched what, half I think it was like half an inning before his Tommy John surgery.
Going back to 2018 when he was still on the shelf half the season.
Yeah.
Even before then, his season would wrap up in August because there was an injury coming. I didn't see he was great in 2018 when we needed him. After that, I don't think he's played a full season. I don't think he's played a full season.
They threw some numbers out earlier this year. I'm just trying to remember. I want to say it was something like since he signed the contract, he's only pitched. It was 48 innings, 47 innings, something like that. Yeah. It was less than 50, which amounts to Boston paying him $18 million a win. Yeah. So,
I honestly think what happened with him happened with Pedro Martinez, because when Pedro lost his velocity on his fastball and he started getting injured, he had to mix it up. So in 04, when Pedro wasn't Pedro in 04. He was kind of like the fastball sinker, all that.
Right.
Chris Sale was 100 miles an hour, 99 all the time. And you could tell he couldn't throw that anymore, so he had to rely on the breaking ball and that. I just think he had a tough time adapting to that. And that's probably why the injuries happened, because his body was breaking down on him, obviously, because I was at a Red Sox game one time, and all of a sudden he just left the game. We were like, well, what happened? Like, what happened there? Like, you just left? Okay. We wouldn't know until later on. Oh, he's got arthritis going on. He's on the shelf now. And it's like, what?
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong too. Wasn't his first, I want to say season ending, but wasn't his first major injury? He fractured a rib.
Yeah.
With a throwing motion, like in the middle of the pitch, he just hunched over, and it's like, well,
he's been I hate to say it, but he's been a problem since that. I mean, 2018, don't get me wrong, he had a great year. I mean, he was that guy that pitched game 1, game 3, and then he came in to close it out in what game we beat the Dodgers in. But after that, I don't think he pitched more than 10, 12 games a year. He was always late after spring training. They shut him down. He'd begin spring training in May, or, vice versa. It was just an experiment. Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I'm a Boston guy. That's the worst contract.
Speaking of Boston, and Joe, I brought this up last week.
Yeah.
I want to bring it up again, and maybe not just him, but, a guy like Yaz, who's probably about 83, 84. You got a guy like Koufax. I think Koufax is probably 87 or 88. Yeah. Willie's 90. Maybe you got a guy like Mike Schmidt, who's maybe 72, 73. What are these guys who are like, I mean, the stats they put together are mind-boggling. What do these guys think of the kind of money that the guys now are getting?
There's got to be some envy there somewhere. Has to be envy. I can't. I mean, Yaz Triple Crown, 67. Schmidt with a big contract, all that stuff. I mean, there's got to be some type of envious, but like we talked about, I don't know how their pension scale works. So if there's more money in the league, does their pension get higher as cost of living and all that?
I'm sure they get. Yeah, I'm sure it gets in.
So I mean, they're probably not complaining. Obviously, they're ambassadors to the sport. Yaz comes to Fenway, pops in the booth now and then. He's always promoting the product, the game, the whatever. So they're on that type of behavior. But yeah, the only way you're going to figure this out is if you run into him while he's out to dinner and sit down and be like, hey, what do you think of Scherzer getting X amount of money this year and all that? What are your thoughts?
I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, if Verlander and Scherzer are making $43 million, if you look at Koufax's like last 4 seasons,
yeah,
he had to be $100 million a year with the kind of stats he put up.
Yeah. In the other flip side of the argument, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but won't the old guy versus the new guy say, well, the game has changed. It's different now. There's more pressure. There's more this and that. What do you think?
Yeah, you always hear that. It's the same thing with play. When they talk about football is a great example where it's like, oh, Tom Brady wouldn't last 2 weeks in the era Joe Montana played in, or, where and Benny and I, like he said, we always talk about baseball. When they mentioned somebody like a Sandy Koufax, wouldn't last a week pitching against some of the hitters today, which I think is ludicrous. But You always get that. The problem is that when you see someone like a Mike Schmidt, like a Cal Ripken, like a Kirby Puckett, somebody like that, who I have no doubt would be an all-star in today's game, making 5% what the players make today. I would be frustrated if that was me. Even someone like a Ripken or Randy Johnson, who are worth tens of millions of dollars, and their great grandkids are going to be fine because they were smart with their money. It's got to be frustrating. It has to.
And like a guy like Koufax, like I said, he threw 27 complete games in 1966. These guys making $43 million. I mean, they're pitching 6 innings.
Yeah. Well, and they just lowered the cutoff not that long ago. You can get a win if you pitch 1 out more than 4 innings. So I mean, you see pitchers today getting pulled in the 5th inning.
Yeah, and
getting
still
the
get the win.
Like, they got 1 or 2 outs in the 5th, and then they get the win. It's like, no.
And then the argument
6, 7 deep,
right.
And
then the argument to that is, the games are longer now, or the seasons are longer, and all that stuff. But I knew we touched upon this, Benny, last week. But '86, I went to Fenway Park, Sox Oakland, and I got seats behind home plate, and I knew the game was changing when Kensengo and McGuire got up, and I saw these 2 Bash brothers handling the baseball bat like it was a wiffle ball bat. And McGuire and Kensengo, I think Kensengo did hit a home run. McGuire struck out, but he was hitting foul balls that were probably still in flight by the time I left the ballpark. I knew the game was changing then, whether it was steroids, whatever, but they weren't your idols growing up, so to speak. These guys were big monster baseball players and athletic, obviously, because they hit home runs and they stole bases, but the game was different then, that's for sure.
I think the game actually changed in the late '60s when Herman Munster tried out for the Dodgers, and he knocked the scoreboard off its hinges with a home run. Yeah, I think that. But no, I agree with you that was pretty much it. Like once you saw
everything changed, it was like
I mean, you had guys like Richie Ashburn. I'm trying to think Fred Lynn. Fred Lynn wasn't a big guy.
No, he was my favorite growing up.
But
he was a hustler. He was a scrapper. He was,
Steve Garvey wasn't a big guy. Steve Garvey was 5'10". He had the top eye forearms. None of these guys were giants, but like McGuire. I mean, there's Paul Bunyan.
Well,
he was huge.
Unfortunately, history has taught us why Mark McGuire looked the way he did, though.
But he took them when they were legal. And he testified under oath, unlike everybody else, namely Clemens.
Just like Rafael Palmeiro he got a tainted B12 shot out of Miguel Tejada's
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah. And Benny, I got to disagree with you. It wasn't the 60s with Herman Munster. Baseball changed forever in the 90s. You had a kid with a bad shoulder becoming an all-star pitcher. Don't forget that kid that owned the Minnesota Twins for a little while, and then when the Angels won the pennant with actual Angels in the outfield, that's got to be cheating at that point,
including Matthew McConaughey.
Right.
Well, one of the smallest players we were overlooking is definitely Kirby Puckett, not a very big man.
There's a
Tony Gwynn, not a big guy.
Albie Pearson played for the Angels in the '60s. Was 5'3".
Oh my God, that's Freddie Patek, Angels, right?
Oh yeah, Freddie Patek. Yeah, same thing.
Well, I went to a Red Sox game. Angels were routing the Red Sox. It was like 21-0. Freddie Patek was getting ready to hit his 4th home run, and we all gave him a standing ovation in Boston. It was great. I looked at him at home plate. I'm like, God, that guy's small, but boy, could he hit a baseball?
Right.
Patek hit 3 home runs in one game.
He almost hit 4. It was back in, I want to say, early 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, they were booing the Red Sox and cheering the Angels. That's how bad it was.
I mean, just. You talk now. Just what's his name? In Houston, Altuve. He's like 5'5" or something.
Yeah, he's a small guy.
Yeah,
but he's like an all or nothing ball player too. Either he's hitting the game winner or he's not, and that's where I think the game has changed now. If you need a base hit to win this game, or we can always get into this argument: when do you bunt? Why don't they bunt anymore in baseball? Isn't the object is to advance the runner to get that run home? Nobody bunts anymore. It's insane. And I think that's the incentivized contract part of it. You put these guys in that position, the owners want to see a home run because home runs make money and home runs win games, and home runs, people like the offense as opposed to the defense, I guess.
What amazes me is you have guys who can strike out 125 times and still hit it 300, which was unheard of 30 years ago.
Because their at-bat percentage is probably obviously much higher than it was 30, 40 years ago. Sure. You're up 5-6 times a game now as opposed to 3 or 4.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially now with, don't get me started on how irritated I was seeing one in the World Series. But now that they're running what they call bullpen games, where you'll pitch 6 or 7 people, each pitcher plays about an inning and a half, maybe 2 if you're lucky. So it doesn't take. And again, no disrespect, these guys are better than I'll ever be, even in my wildest dreams. But when you play the bullpen once a week for the season, you're going to have it doesn't take much, like you were talking about with Boston or seeing the Yankees or what Yankees and Baltimore had a game. Boston and Baltimore had a game. The final score was 13-12 with 60 hit. It was the first time in Major League Baseball history a team had won a game after giving up over 25 hits or whatever it was. Wow. You had something like 60 hits in the game because you're playing the closer in the 4th inning, and then you're deep into the bullpen 5-6 innings into the game. You're playing.
Sure.
Again, no disrespect to their talent, but you're playing the worst pitchers the team has by the 6th, 7th inning.
Well, that's how the Red Sox won it in 2018. It was getting frustrating after a while because Chris Sale would go 4 innings, 5 innings, and every inning it was a new pitcher or every batter. It was always a game of matchups, and it was almost like clockwork. And it was like, I think that's why the pitch clock came in now, because obviously the Yankees Red Sox games lasted like 8 hours a night.
Right.
But that's how they won in 18. It was who's coming up, how's it rotating, and it was always bullpen action. And you just knew that whether it was Dice K or whatever back in the day, it was always they weren't going more than 4 or 5 innings. If they did go more than that, it was Kurt Schilling, I think, pitched 6 innings against the Yankees in the ALCS. And that was like we were godsmacked with the bloody sock and like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then, Derek Lowe and all those guys would come in. But 2018, I agree with you there. It was always whoever was coming up, they were facing this, this pitcher or whatever. So, yeah, the bullpen games now, it turns me off kind of, but well, commercials make money.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. So we've been talking baseball contracts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to thank Dan, the smartest man in the room. He is the smartest man in the room. The player, you didn't tell me that Dan was the smartest man in the room.
It's a well-kept secret, but now you know.
It's a well-kept secret. Okay. I want to thank you both for coming on here, the Twin Bill Baseball Podcast. Any final thoughts from you guys?
Well, I mean, I think we've literally touched just the tip of the iceberg as far as topics we can talk about. I mean, I thought of maybe, greatest teams of all time. I thought of while we were just chatting, I thought the value of maybe analytics versus just, gumshoe.
We got to do a favorite ballpark one too.
Historic ballparks. Absolutely.
How long of a show do you need to say Camden Yards, and then that's it? So,
right.
I loved Camden Yards when they first opened. I loved that backdrop and everything.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a bucket list for me still.
Hey,
unbelievable.
I'm just grateful. It's been a couple. Benny? I think our old program. So it's been a couple years since I've been able to crack out the smartest man in the room moniker. So it was nice to a nickname. I visit an old friend.
Nice.
But we got to be careful talking contracts, though. We talk too much money. Benny's going to want to raise.
No kidding. This is like a tax bracket. This is like taxes right here, Benny. I went to print this out. I'm like, it won't stop printing. Like, what's going on here?
I just wanted enough money to upgrade from bologna to pork roll. That's all.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Get some bread in a can. You'll love that.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, guys. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm What a Day Joe with the player and Dan, the smartest man in the room. I want to thank everybody for coming on to the Twin Bill Baseball Podcast. Of course, you can tune into the Baseball Podcast wherever you get your YouTube, as well as Facebook, and, of course, wherever you find your podcasts and all that stuff. So thanks a lot, guys. You have a good one.
Take care.
All right, take care. Thanks.